Hi, I'm Lady Genevieve. As you can probably tell by my voice, I am recovering from a cold, and it is definitely a cold. I took 2 tests, and it's not the other thing. But I am happy to share that I was given screeners for season 3 of The Boys. I've now watched the entire season, and I have a whole lot of thoughts about this season's material. In addition to today's video, I'm going to be doing weekly reviews, so make sure that you subscribe if you want to keep up with my running commentary of each new episode as it airs to the masses. Showrunner Eric Kripke has said in many interviews that this season is a meditation on toxic masculinity. While I can see what he means by that as it applies to a lot of the character material for people like Homelander and Butcher, I found that the theme of toxic masculinity felt very secondary to me as a viewer in comparison to other political messaging and referencing throughout the season. The Boys has always been heavy with socio-political commentary, but this season actually felt even more political than I perhaps was expecting it to be. There are a lot of very specific do not reveals for this season, so I cannot give my full opinions on the political subject matter of the overall season until we start getting into the episodic reviews. However, I can prepare you in a general sense by recommending certain historical events, mostly war crimes really, to read up on that I feel are relevant to the material of The Boys Season 3. Consider this my recommended relevant reading list. I would suggest that you read up on Operation Condor. That was the US/CIA campaign of terror in Latin America. There was the arming, training, and funding of Contras. There were assassinations. There was a lot of support for military dictatorships, all of that awful stuff. Similarly, you should also read up on the School of Americas. That's the US military school where they trained Latin Americans to be war criminals, dictators, torturers, and assassins. That school is in fact still around today, by the way. They just changed the name to the Western Hemisphere Institute for Security Cooperation. And finally, I would also advise you to read up on Operation Cyclone, which is when the US armed the Afghan Mujahideen because they wanted to use them as a proxy to fight against the Soviet Union and also undermine socialism in Afghanistan. It's happened more than once that if I'm discussing a piece of entertainment media and I mention political aspects of that material, some random viewer or viewers will get upset that I'm mentioning politics, but I'm going to tell you right now that even if I cared, which I don't, about listening to people who think that politics can be removed from my perspective on various entertainment media, The Boys Season 3 is extremely political. The show has always been political, but this season in particular provoked a lot of opinions, which I am currently unable to share because each episode has a lot of do not reveals for critics and journalists who have been given this early access to the season, but we will definitely be getting into more of those discussions as we get further along into the airing of these episodes. So if you do not want to hear political opinions, then my reviews will not be the ones for you, so feel free to find some other magical unicorn of a channel that is somehow able to discuss and analyze The Boys without delving into the socio-political commentary of the show and its writing. So now I thought that I would go through and give some brief thoughts on major characters from this season. First, we can go through the characters on the side of the 7. Before we get into the soups, though, I thought that I would just mention that Ashley was a real surprise to watch in season 3. To give credit where credit's due, she's always been really good at giving that very distinct Ashley energy when it's time for her to deliver. But this season, I feel like she was taken to a new level, which is good because it keeps her from becoming a one-dimensional character or a one-note character. Now on to the soups. I don't entirely remember if I've made this point clear, but my least favorite character is the Deep. I don't like him. I've never liked him. My perspective is that his main purpose is to be a punching bag, and I would say he's even more of one in this season. Some people who discuss and review this show seem to think that he has more dimension as a character than I personally think that he has. I've never gotten that impression from him. I don't know what show those people are watching. The Deep is sort of trying to do a Leah Remini thing this season, but the difference is that he has none of her wit or charisma. Yeah, to reiterate, I don't like him. Not much else to add. Next up, Maeve. The Boys as a show is a jam-packed ensemble, and overall I don't think Maeve gets as much airtime as some of the other characters, and there was a point in the season where I was starting to wonder, is this all Maeve is going to do this season? But once all was said and done, Maeve definitely has her moment. If we think back to season 2, we got to see Maeve show up right when the team needed her to lay a beat down. This season is obviously a different story, but she still gets a big moment or two that I really enjoyed seeing. But of course, I cannot share any of those details until we get to see those moments air to everyone. Black Noir is a character with more popularity than some people might think. He's a man of mystery. He keeps a lot of things to himself. But this season, we do get to learn a lot more about Black Noir's backstory and get more of a sense of who he is behind the mask. And I don't think it's what people would expect it to be. If I'm not mistaken, you can correct me if I'm wrong, in the comics, Black Noir was a clone of Homelander, but that's definitely not his story on the show. I enjoyed this greater insight into Black Noir as a character, and I think other people are also going to enjoy it. But actually, I think the biggest revelation on the side of the Seven this season is A-Train. When we were introduced to him in season 1, I'm pretty sure a lot of us really didn't like him. He did a lot of bad things and was largely unapologetic for them. But this time around, he really gets deconstructed as a character. There are a lot of things reviewers are not allowed to share ahead of airing, but for the sake of my viewers, I think I should mention this. One of the things that A-Train experiences this season is some pretty nasty bullying by Homelander about the fact that since he's had some health struggles with his heart and cannot run as much or as fast as he used to, he has apparently gained a bit of weight. I didn't notice anything different about his weight until it was pointed out by Homelander, but it does appear as though they might have added a small layer of padding around his midsection. Anyway, the reason I bring this up is that if you struggle with an eating disorder, I think those exchanges between these characters might be challenging to watch. It caught me off guard because that's not something the show has done before with those specific characters. They have made mentions about how Annie used to have an eating disorder, but it's not been something as active in her present storyline. For A-Train as a character, if we go back to season 1, I don't remember what they were filming, but there was some instance of him sharing something about his past and being stopped by a producer who wanted him to change the narrative. And it was this very uncomfortable way of trying to micromanage how he shared his life experiences as a Black man. They definitely explore that type of material to a much greater degree this season for A-Train. It's not that I necessarily have done a complete 180 with him where I didn't like him before and now I'm a huge fan, but I'm so much more intrigued to see him potentially grow and evolve even more as a character, to the point that I think if they want to take him in this direction, I could easily see him helping to bring down Vought at some point down the line, depending on how many seasons we end up getting of the show. Next up, Homelander. Like I said before, Eric Kripke has said that the show this season is a meditation on toxic masculinity. I personally feel as though that's predominantly applicable to Homelander and Butcher as characters on this season. If season 1 was an introduction to Homelander and season 2 was more about Homelander's entanglement and twisted relationship with Stormfront, I think season 3 does so much more to explore Homelander's psychology so you can better understand why he does the things that he does. Any and all of the juiciest details I'm not going to be able to share because of the do not reveal lists given for each episode, but in a very general sense, there is a lot of work done to mine the layers of how desperately Homelander wants to be loved and accepted, which is perhaps surprising since his violence and antics don't necessarily make me think of someone who wants to be loved. He's a lot scarier this season because of how much the people around him enable him, not without reason, of course, but I will let all of you see what goes into that. Finally, of course, on the side of the 7, we have Starlight, Annie. She is struggling, as anyone with a moral compass would, when still trapped in the confines of the Vought Corporation, and the 7 as a deeply corrupt superhero team. She definitely gets her punches in with trying to stand her ground against Homelander, but things quickly go from bad to worse, and there is also a lot of drama with Hughie. But if Annie is your girl and she's your favorite, I think you'll be really happy with how things develop for her by the time the season wraps. Switching over to the boys now and the members of that team, starting with Mother's Milk, you get to learn a lot more about the history of Mother's Milk and the generational trauma he has that he is struggling with and how it impacts his ability to try to be present as a father for his daughter. Similarly, Butcher's backstory is explored more this season. This really does feel like a season of revelations and backstories. Up until this point, we haven't really known about what happened in the childhoods of characters like Mother's Milk and Butcher to make these characters the way that they are. They even mention more information about how it is that these two met. Billy is a character that we've never really been able to get to the root of, because I think a lot of us thought that if he just got Becca back, he would be good, and then she came back and revealed that he already had a lot of these issues, and she was absolutely right. Butcher is a character that is full of rage, and we finally get to understand why that is. Another subplot this season is something we've seen in the trailer, so I know I can talk a little bit about it. I find it so fitting that the powers that he develops are so similar to Homelander's powers. We've seen that he gets laser eyes, among other things. Butcher hates Homelander so much, but they have a lot of similarities in how vicious and full of rage they are as characters and how much they selfishly hurt the people around them, that I really appreciate that this opportunity was taken to draw another parallel between them as characters. Butcher has always been a nasty piece of work, but he's even worse this season. I get that for the sake of the show, they like to always have him pushing towards the edge of limits and boundaries. I personally would have just washed my hands of him a long time ago, but luckily for him, he has had people who somehow still try to help him. But this season, you can see that he's really gone too far for a lot of these people who have supported him for as long as they have. Hughie also, surprisingly, is in the mix of people who needs to unpack their toxic masculinity. I'm still deciding how I feel about the choice to include him in that storyline, but full disclosure here, he's obviously nowhere near as bad as Butcher or Homelander, but he still has his own lessons to learn about it in this season. We'll just leave it at that for now until we can get into more specifics on an episodic basis. If you couldn't tell, I've been rushing through some of these character snippets because I mostly want to talk about my favorite person, which is Kimiko. Frenchie's story does not exist without Kimiko, and they had more of a separation in season 2 before making amends and ending that arc with a cute little twirl. But this season, Kimiko is really struggling with feeling like a monster. She resents having her powers, and I know a lot of people really love getting to see Kimiko wreak some havoc because she can do a lot of things. She can physically crack some skulls, and we love that for her. But I also love getting to explore the emotional layers of her as a character. I know I've already made it clear that I've been wanting to see Frenchie and Kimiko finally get together and be a couple and just admit that they love each other. I want that good romantic payoff. And going into season 3 with that perspective, I don't know how to explain how I feel about what developments we get to see with their relationship. There were things that I loved seeing for them, but there's also this one aspect of it that made me want to really get into it with Eric Kripke. I want answers, and I'm incredibly frustrated by the fact that it only took 15 minutes of one episode of this season for me to see Hughie and Annie clapping cheeks, but the show still wants to mess with me about just letting Kimiko and Frenchie be a romantic couple. Do Japanese women not have the right to be in love with a French male wife? I'm sick and tired of these games, Eric. It's season 3. They love each other. Stop trying to make it like, oh, but they're so weird and different that they're not allowed to just do the cute domestic thing when you've got Hughie and Annie living together. I'm so tired. Truly, I'm exhausted. I don't have the patience for this, or I don't think it's going to last much longer. Let's just get to the last section of this video and move on, because I'm already running late with finishing this video to post it in time for the embargo. I'm filming this and the embargo has already lifted. We've got some villains this season, besides Homelander and Butcher, of course. We've got Soldier Boy, played by Jensen Ackles. I do think he played the character well. However, I was kind of surprised that they didn't use him more. I think at this point the ensemble is so bloated that it's hard to give everyone an equal piece of the pie. There are some flashback glimpses of him early on in the season, but the present day unveiling or de-icing of the character doesn't happen until much later than I thought that it would. If we compare it to season 2, for example, they didn't wait very long to introduce Stormfront, so you had more time to get introduced to her and work your way up to that big reveal of the character being this violent fascist at the end of episode 3. This show always has a 3-episode premiere each season, so you get a lot of information about her. But for Soldier Boy, I just wish that they had moved a little faster to start mining the layers of who this character is. By the time the season is finished, you do have more information about his origins as a character and why he is the way that he is, but I still wish that they had used him more than they did. There's also Victoria Newman. You get a lot more information about her origins as a character as well, and what it is that she's trying to achieve. I think in the comics this character is actually a man, but I like that they've made her a woman simply because I think there's a common myth among certain types of people that as long as you put a woman or more women in political power, that things will become better, as if there haven't been plenty of women who commit horrific war crimes. But let me not go on that tangent today because I simply do not have the time. Victoria is one bad lady, but I'm glad she's on the show. I think she is an important character to show how truly evil politicians are and how they will go to any means to advance their careers in Washington, D.C. One of the things I've seen repeatedly mentioned in the promotion for season 3 is Karl Urban talking about how shocking the show is, and more specifically, the first 10 minutes of the first episode of this season. I will tell you right now that he was not exaggerating at all. I gasped out loud when I saw what it was that he was talking about. It was shocking and it was gnarly. There have also been quite a few mentions about Herogasm, and yeah, that's a lot to see as well. It's very graphic. There's a lot happening. I really can't imagine what the boys will do in a 4th season to escalate things, but I'm sure they will find a way to deeply unsettle me yet again. Overall, I did like a lot of the material for this season. My main nitpicks were with certain political commentary, which I can't explain because of spoilers on the Do Not Reveal list, inaccuracies in some of the historical material and backstory for Soldier Boy, which I cannot explain because of spoilers on the Do Not Reveal list, and a specific aspect of the development of Frenchie and Kimiko's relationship, which I cannot explain right now because of spoilers on the Do Not Reveal list. But everything else I really enjoyed. If you've enjoyed the previous 2 seasons of The Boys, I think you will find plenty to enjoy and sink your teeth into with these episodes. I don't think there's been an official season 4 renewal at the time of me making this review, but the season does end in such a way that there's definitely a lot left to explore. If anything, I think it's easier to say what isn't in this season than what is. For example, in season 2, there was that conflict with the patients at that facility, and one of them was a patient named Cindy who had a buzz cut. I was waiting to see if we would have them brought back this season, but nothing has come of that yet. I also wanted to see if maybe we were going to get a surprise Zack Snyder cameo, since we got more of a look at that Dawn of the Seven film in this season, and Zack chimed in on the promo for The Boys season 3 on Twitter. But sadly, there was no Zack Snyder cameo, but maybe there will be in a future season. I'm assuming they will try to get him in there at some point and cameo. And cameos are a common thing for The Boys as a show, though I cannot comment on anything about who may or may not appear in that regard in season 3. I also have been thinking for a while now that Hughie's mother is going to return at some point, because I got the impression they were hinting at it back in an earlier season, but that still has not happened yet. I still want it to be Meg Ryan. I know that she has visited Jack on set before. He talked about it in an interview, and I want people to put some respect on the rom-com genre. And if Meg Ryan appears on The Boys, then people will start going back and watching her classics. Win-win.
Yeah, win-win.
Thank you for watching. Stay tuned for my episodic reviews of season 3 of The Boys, when I will hopefully sound a little bit better than I do now. I really threw this together in a rush. I wanted to film this faster, but this cold has been a lot for me to deal with. I've had to take a lot of extra naps just because my body is really tired from trying to fight this thing off. But anyway, I will see you in the next one. Bye.